Hello, Nature Journal Educator friends, and welcome to your Nature Journal Educator workshop with your regular hosts, me, John Muir Laws, and Ivea, the Mad Botanist Moore. Today we have an incredible special guest, Amy Schleser, who was a Bay Area nature journaler who we used to have lots of in-person adventures with, is a brilliant visualizer of data and information, and also just a big box of fun. You're going to enjoy this. Today, we're going to be looking at the work that she's been doing in citizen science and stewardship through the pages of her nature journal. Before we dive deep into what Amy's been up to, Avea, could you let us know opportunities and things that are happening in the nature journaling community?
Certainly.
And now it's my pleasure to introduce to all of you, or to reintroduce perhaps an old friend to you. Amy Schleser is a nature journaler, visualizer, science communicator, and really deep thinker, interesting thinker. If you would ever have an opportunity to kind of take a visit in somebody else's brains, I would love to see what the world looks like and feels like from inside Amy's neurons looking out. And you can see this reflected in the pages of her nature journaling. I think that's the closest thing we can do to a brain transplant. Um, and what she's going to be talking to us today about is how she combines her work in nature journaling and visual thinking, develops that more richly through the process of nature journaling. So this is citizen science meets nature journaling. Amy, thank you so much for spending time with us today. It is really great to see you again.
It's great to see you all too. I've only ever made it to like four of these educator forums, I think, in the past like 4 years. But every time, yeah, I don't know, they're great and I learned so much. So yeah, thanks, Jack. Thanks, Ivea. And hello, all. Really excited to be here. I'm Amy, as they said, and I've been nature journaling for about 8 years now. I got into citizen science about 2 years ago. And since citizen science usually involves taking a lot of notes and data collection, it seemed natural to me to combine it with my nature journaling sketchbook. So the main two citizen science projects I'm going to talk about today are called the Bald Eagle Nest Watch and the Bird Collision Core, which is about birds colliding with windows. I've done a few more citizen science projects too. I kind of gotten obsessed with them, just like I got obsessed with nature journaling and pulled into that world, and now I look for them online and really fun. I've only ever sketch noted these ones, so I won't talk about them too much, but it's cool just the variety of things you know that might be going on in your community and are going on in my community. I find a lot of mine through like our local Audubon organization, but there are so many websites and there's virtual projects too, or things that like oftentimes I go out physically, sometimes in groups or physically outdoors, but there's all, there's bird feeders you can do from indoors too. So a lot of different ways to do citizen science. Let me go back to that one again. Yeah, and so I am an educator of sorts, but I did want to clarify that I have not done any of these citizen science projects with students. So I won't be able to, well, I do have some ideas of how to recommend of like how we could apply this, but essentially the idea is that today we'll look at my personal citizen science nature journalers, and then hopefully they might inspire some ideas of how to do the citizen science with students. So we should have at least a half an hour after I show my citizen science journals to talk together. When I'm halfway through, Eve, or Jack, I need to remember to check the time, make sure I'm on time. You'll see this break where I start talking about the other citizen science projects. I got to remember to do that. Make sure that we have some time at the end. We might do something like breakout rooms so that we can chat with each other and come up with more ideas.
No worries.
Yeah, great. I would love to learn a little bit about what kind of educators y'all are who are here today. If you could just type in chat, I'm curious like what type of educator you are, if you're a classroom teacher or a homeschool teacher or kind of a club or group leader, and then if there are any ages or grades of your students, if that's applicable, or maybe it's, adults or, any grades K through 12. And as you're doing that, I'll tell you a little bit about myself as an educator, and check in on chat again in a minute. So I do have a teaching degree in K through 12 art education. And though I kind of fell in love with science in college and ended up becoming more of a science writer after that. So I worked at the Field Museum, which is a natural history museum in Chicago, for a few years, and I worked directly with scientists there. So they tell me about their research, and I'd kind of translate that for an audience of the general public. And so I worked on museum exhibits, like about biomechanics, which is the inner workings of living things, and it's totally fascinating. Started making diagrams back then, and other exhibits about like Sue the T-Rex and other things. And now I'm not working in a museum currently, but I am still doing education things, more kind of behind the scenes, not in classrooms. I make science curriculum for kindergarten through 5th grade, and I mainly do the visual work for that. We make a ton of videos, so I'm a video editor and creator and help film and develop hands-on activities and all that such stuff. That's aligned with NGSS, if any of y'all are classroom teachers and know about that. And yeah, I also run a local nature journal club in Madison. So that's my background. Oh, and one more note, I actually got to talk briefly yesterday with a 4th grade teacher who did one of these projects, the bird collision core, with her class. She's done it for a few years, so I have some of her ideas in mind as well as we talk, so I'm excited. And then, oh, can I not see chat? Oh, I can't see chat. Okay, I want to see what y'all are doing. Adult educators, online club leaders that we have here, kids and some adults, community education, middle school club leaders, adults. Wow. Just in front of this. Okay, this is awesome. Yeah, what a great mix of people. I love educators. I love helping teachers behind the scenes. So yeah, so fun to be here with y'all. Okay. So the first citizen science project I got into was the bald eagle nest watch. And I got into it mainly because I had a lot of free time. I just moved across the country. I knew no one except my husband. So I knew one person. And also winters are very cold here and long here. And I'm always like, I'll go outside and nature journal and do things during the winter. And I plan on it. But it's cold and I was out. So I love having commitments that I can't break. And so honestly, that's one of the reasons that I was looking for a citizen science project. But obviously the other reason is that you actually get to contribute to science and help scientists. And I think hopefully that idea will connect to students a lot too. We all do nature journaling and it's so valuable and inspiring. I'm assuming to all of us personally. But it's so cool to have the opportunity to kind of use our nature journalers or take data in our nature journals about that so that like our nature journals can be valuable to scientists too. All right, let's see. All right, so here's some basic info on the Bald Eagle Nest Watch project. It happens yearly. It goes from 5 to 6 months long, depending on how long it takes the baby little eagles to leave the nest. And it was a lot of people volunteered, and it's organized so in our entire county. I don't even know how many nests there are. I think over 100, and you're expected to go out once a week for an hour. The reason is because, bald eagles were endangered for a long time due to the pesticide DDT. And in 2007, they were taken off the endangered species list, but they're still monitoring the population, making sure it continues to recover. And yeah, so each nest has a team of people assigned. And it was also very interesting. All the locations are completely confidential. So we signed a waiver that we will not tell anyone where our nest is, which is fascinating and understandable. Like human, people get excited and visit that nest and everything could bother the eagles potentially. So um, let's see. And so essentially just the procedure, what I did, I went to a marsh each week and sat down with my little lawn chair thing and used a scope and had my nature journal. I was extremely far away. You can see the yellow arrow on screen is pointing to the nest in the tree. And the black arrow is pointing to a little bald eagle up there. So quite far away. And what they want you to do as far as what data I was collecting, people are supposed to fill in a data sheet. I'll show it bigger in a second, tiny at the bottom of the screen, and then also submit that online. And they provide those printable sheets, but instead of using their form, I thought, why not take those data notes in my nature journal? So I kind of started with, of course, like what do I need to make sure I do to have the study be successful. Um, and yeah, so I can nature journal about anything else I'm interested. But I had to get this data in my sketchbook. So some of the things are where I was, the date when I started. They want things like sky code. I'll show that in a second. So kind of what the sky and weather and wind was like, temperature. Something that surprised me, I didn't know, like water frozen or not, eagle access to water. That was interesting. Whether the bald eagles are even there, how many bald eagles I see, one or two adults, or who knows if there's three, that's weird, but how many adults I see, if I see any nestlings yet, or fledglings, meaning they have left the tree. And then and then there's a list of behaviors I'll show in a minute. And every time I see one of those specific behaviors I'm supposed to track, I write down the time, and I write down who did it. And let's see, and yeah, some of the codes that I had to remember. And the other thing, other than these data sheets, was they did training sessions, which I just kind of sketch noted to help myself remember as well. Even though they printed, they gave us a lot of resources, but obviously, many of us think through drawing and remember through drawing. So some of the behaviors I was looking for was if there are babies there, are they starting to flap their wings or not? Do you see the parents feeding any babies, or are they like eating something themselves? And I will say normally one of my favorite parts about going out and nature journaling is like not knowing much at all about like the place I'm going to. I really like being curious and having and noticing little mysteries. So this was interesting to me in that with the training, like I needed to know what to look for. Some things were given away. I knew that the adults, their coloration, and the babies were going to look different. And one of the critical things that they told us, which is really fascinating, is how can you tell if the bald eagles have laid eggs? We can't see an upper view, so I'm taking all these notes. What happens? Is it just like, okay, there's a nest there. Okay, there's an adult sitting in the nest. That's good. So maybe there's eggs once they start sitting in a nest for a long time. How can you tell if the eggs have hatched, if the babies aren't tall enough to get out of the egg? So essentially they said you had to pay attention, and like if you notice, yeah, the like eagle sitting up higher, they're like they need more room. And that's the sign an egg has hatched. So you get used to like how low they are in the nest, and then when they're a little higher. So all these interesting things that we kind of had to be trained for and know. So a lot of kind of prep work before even went out and started nature journaling. Those are just some of my other notes on training things I was looking for. And let's see. Okay, so and to remember all of this, there was two main things I did in my nature journal. And so they had their template, and I essentially was just like, I'm going to move their written template into a more fun hand-drawn template in my page. So at the top of all my sketchbook pages every week, I kind of made, a fill in the blank form that I was going to put all that critical information so I couldn't forget it. So let's see. So, I always had a date box and a start time and end time. And then getting a little creative. The sky, what did that look like? I always doodle a little picture, how windy it was. I imagined a blade of grass, and if it was a little windy or if it was extremely windy, I might draw it really bent. Temperature, which I just take from my smartphone, and then the water was frozen. Or if it was snowing, I kind of started like drawing a boot at some point of the snow level for fun. What else? And then obviously I had to track the behaviors. So I kind of did a grid of who, when, what, who was the kind of the summary of what they wanted. So yeah, who being, was it an adult? Was it a chick? Also, it was interesting that apparently there's like a slight size difference in males versus females. Females are a little bigger, but I couldn't tell the difference. I was like, I'm not sure. And so you just label them adult one, adult two, and if next week it's different, that's okay. No one's bothered by that. So that was very helpful. Let's see. And then anything else? I knew I had to get the data, but we're nature journalists. We get distracted isn't quite the right word, but there's so many amazing things going on, so that I would also just draw and write about and write questions about anything that was interesting to me. Let me grab my charger. Hold on. It's right here. My computer is going to die. I do this a lot. And that's not the right cord. Okay, hold on. I'm going to do a zoom in on that. I'll give us one other minute to look at something else. And I'll go through this again. This is week one of my data pages, and I'll kind of flip through many and kind of tell the story in a minute. The other thing, this kind of second thing I did to prepare for this was make myself a little kind of bookmark. My bookmark is huge because my sketchbook is huge. So on screen, this is both sides of the bookmark. Oops, and yeah, and so reminder of like, what behaviors do I need? And weather, I have to remember, oh, drizzly and rainy are two different things in the scientist's mind for this, so make sure I notice the differences between those. Let's see. And then the other thing I did before starting in the field was to remind myself what bald eagles even look like. So these were drawn from photos, and I think this is kind of the only time I ever strive to make a pretty picture. Um, like I said before, the eagles were very far away from me, so even if I wanted to make a detailed drawing of them in the field, it would be very hard to. Um, and when I was out in the field, like the more interesting things to me, at least, for the study of nesting and everything, were less so what the eagles looked like and more how they were interacting with each other or where they were in comparison to the nest and the tree. So I was often just kind of doodling or simplifying like the tree they were on, where that nest was, and like maybe making a little dot. These blue circles are just like, yep, those are my eagles. They're just little eagles. And let's see. And so I did on my bookmark too, just to remind myself. One thing that is helpful I've learned, I think, from Jack is that, like, the basic shapes of a bird, if you kind of remember that, then your faster drawings, if I can remember, like, will look a bit more like an eagle. So if I remember, oh, it kind of has a flat head and its eye is compared to the beak is kind of right here. So I put that on my bookmark too, so I could reference it. All right. Now I'm going to show you a bunch of pages. And before I do, I'm actually going to find where my charger is. So feel free to digest what is on here if you can read it small on screen. And otherwise, someone just can hum some music like a commercial or jump in with anything you want to say, Jack or Ivea or whatever. Sorry about this. Be right back.
Um, First of all, I'm seeing Kirsten's comment about how the bookmark is amazing, and Kirsten loves the idea of creating that for a field resource, and I so agree. All of the icons, oh my God, just data happy. Jack, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, it's also fun. I kind of like this with this minimal palette, you get a real sense of the time of the year. I'd see that there's it's browns and grays, and but this idea of the data table, um, you've got these timed events. I wonder how looking at things through that lens would change the way you observe. This is really, really interesting.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you. I have found my cable, so I'll jump back in. Let's see. Oh, one other basic note. I like to mainly I labeled my 25 weeks of the study week 1, week 2, but that it gets monotonous, so I left a little room for a title up top. And this is my first week. I didn't see any eagles. That's fine. I saw the nest for the first time, which was fascinating. Also, when you when you're, out in the field, perhaps with students and nothing happens, if they're looking for birds and none of them come, or they don't hear any frogs when they're looking for frogs, like for scientists, like when nothing happens, that's extremely important data. So that's
Yeah.
that's something, to celebrate, even though it kind of feels boring on our end. It's like, you could chat with them about like, why is it important that scientists see when nothing happens as well. So yeah, that can be a fun thing to address, especially if kids feel like that's boring as well. Like, what value does that have in it?
So, and Amy, I'm seeing one of your little circle diagrams down there where you are looking at colors of things.
Yeah.
Could you kind of tell people about that? Because that's a really interesting way that you developed of observing colors and values.
Yeah, so I actually did, you can see in my drawing here, I did kind of like color it in with my markers, but oftentimes to go quicker, sometimes I don't know. I like lots of drawings. I write a lot. I tend to fill up a number of pages, and a way to make drawings quicker is just to be like, here's the colors I'm seeing. Here's where the colors are in the landscape, and then use that as my data. And I could do that with anything. I could, if I'm drawing a toad in a um, in a pond, or something, a fish in an aquarium or something, like it depends on, or if you're drawing them fast and the bald eagle moves away. I kind of know what colors the bald eagle is, but essentially, yeah, I can just kind of make like a color diagram versus spending the time like making it very beautiful and painting it on the scene. Yeah, thanks for asking. Oh, and yes, so that was one of my first time. You can see it's winter as well. I'm not simplifying. I'm not trying to X-ray the tree without its leaves. It just doesn't have any leaves right now. Let's see. Oh, okay. This is week 3 of my study. Gonna have to skip many weeks or we'll never get through this. So that's the first time I actually saw them. Super exciting. And yeah, you can see my little sky doodles. Got another little drawn in the corner. Oh, this is what I showed earlier. So now I'm just kind of noting where they are for the data that the scientists actually needed. They did need to know, like I said before, like what birds you see, if you see any. Okay, I see adults, adult 1, an adult 2, and if one was in the nest, that was important. What the other ones are doing, it doesn't matter. It didn't matter what branch it was sitting on, or it was higher than the nest or lower. And those are just, things that were interesting to me.
Now, how are you able to tell the two bald eagles apart? You've got where A2.
Mhm. So I couldn't tell them apart at all.
Oh,
So that was A1, A2. They said it could be consistent in just that week's notes. So hopefully,
so you're not able to between, you're just sort of tracking one bird and got it.
Yeah, and then the next week it'll be different. Some people were, I don't know, they could tell that the female's supposed to be a little bigger, heavier than the male, and some
Or
people
they're pretending, right?
yeah, see, yeah, exactly. Or they're pretending, who knows? So I couldn't tell at all. Maybe some people were closer to their nests than I was. I was very far away. So mine were just A1 and A2. Let's see. Questions. I love questions. And again, these aren't things I need to answer, just things that were interesting to me. Yeah, and the female versus male roles, was the one sitting on the nest the female, or do they take turns? Oh, one flew off. Oh, what are they going to go get? Is it nest material or food for themselves? Is it food for their partner that's on the nest? Do they switch off, etc.? And some of these things, like I guess this question isn't on there, but like I was wondering if one always sits on the nest, and then in later weeks I'd see them like swapping shifts or something. So it was very clear, it's fun to like have questions, and then, oh, I can actually answer some of my questions via observations sometimes. Um, let's see. Week 6. Let's see. Oh, yes. So I realized that like when the eagles were in the nest, it's just so hard to see their head. So they're almost invisible. You have to look really closely to make sure you don't miss them. A couple times I was like, there's nothing. Oh, wait, there is an eagle in there. Their nests are just so huge. Let's see. Yeah, so that's just a cool photo through the scope. And this is just for myself for fun, but this is just one of my strategies to kind of draw movement, something that happened. So it's just kind of it's just kind of like a 4-panel comic strip. So A1 and A2 are on the tree, and then A2 was on the nest, but he hops in the nest, or he or she, and then A1 also goes into the nest, and then it was hard to tell, but I think A2 flew away. And so I did record some of those things, I think, in my behavior, like my official kind of data notes too, at least who was in the tree and everything. And then this is just for fun for myself. Another way I like to show movement is just kind of lines, kind of like arrow lines. So this is in the sky, essentially. You can see the little trees now down on the ground. They now have leaves. Wow, it's spring now. And some of my notes, there was like a mystery raptor in the sky, and one of them, one of the bald eagles went up there, and I don't know, it didn't have a fight exactly, but I was like, what's going on? It's too far away, but somehow they're interacting. So that was something interesting to me. And as far as the data for scientists, I did record that there was another bird or another raptor like present in the area. Let's see.
Really interesting to see how, when I'm out casually making observations, there's not the additional pressure of observations or data. And when this is going to be contributed to this long-term data set, you really have to be very on your game about which bird it was that was on the nest. And when you're not sure about something, to explicitly state that. I love that sort of epistemological honesty in how you're approaching that.
Thanks. Yeah, it's hard. It's tricky so I had to go back and actually enter all my data online. There are comment boxes to be like, pretty sure A2 did this, think A1 did this. But yeah, if you're a little uncertain, I'll just note it just in case it's helpful. You do the best you can. Let's see. Here's another flight diagram. This one's color coded, so that's a little helpful. And this is just another experience of them, like seeing how they kind of swapped shifts. But also I see like a note over here. It says A1 stayed there for about an hour. Oh yeah, and so this one, let's see, I started to observe that they'd kind of fly in these figure 8s for a while, and they never flew up. They always like started down and then switched up. Anyway, look at that. I wrote a note. This is most likely the path of flight, but I missed it. So that's a guess. And then that one, I think, looks like it was real and it flew back after the et cetera, et cetera. And oh, and that was very interesting because I was noticing they were nearby, but it looks like for most of that, neither was in the nest for most of the time, I think. And that was also my guess. I don't know if the question is on here, but like, so are there no eggs yet? Because they're not in the nest. So just more clues. Skipping a number of weeks, I finally saw that sign of an eagle sitting higher up in the nest, which means in theory that there were now eggs. Yeah, there are now eggs, and if they sit up even higher later or something, they think they hatch. So this was really exciting. Sometimes it was interesting. Sometimes I was so focused on noticing because all of the data is noticing that I sometimes had to remind myself of like wonder, ask questions and stuff. I was in this very noticing mindset. And so I just remember particular this week, I was like, come on, you've got to have so many questions about this, write some questions. And yeah, and I was like, how big are the eggs? So I drew what I thought about a chicken egg was, and maybe the eagle size is about this big. And then I was thinking, yeah, how do they incubate? Are they like standing or laying down? I couldn't tell how deep the nest was. The nest was huge, but like, how tall up, how thick is that nest bottom and stuff. So that was interesting. Let's see. And then, oh yeah, and this is like full spring, probably full summer, because all of a sudden tons of leaves on the tree. I was glad that this study started when the trees were bare, because it became all of a sudden much harder to see them. And then I did, again, this is many weeks later, and the babies had hatched, and I got my first peek of like a little baby head, a little white head peeking above the nest, and I saw two babies that week. I saw two babies, I thought, but they'd like come up and come down and stuff. So that I think was another note. I was like, I think there's two of them. I think I saw two heads like at the same time at one point.
Just, I'm just blown away by all of the layers of thinking. You're not just like, if you're just doing, I'm going to use this data sheet, there would be, this experience would be so much smaller, but your brain is all over the place with this. This is really fun to see.
Oh, great. Yeah, I did. Yeah, as far as my brain being all over the place, one thing I wanted to mention is that, oh, I don't know, if you do this with students, there's the specific data you need, but you can't help but notice everything else that's going on. And so one thing I started getting really interested in and started just collecting data kind of for myself was, I realized, the leaves, no leaves was starting to become interesting to me. So yeah, if I saw any plant growth at one point, and sometimes I'd only realize that I wanted to track seeing things when I saw it for the first time. So like for the first time, I saw a little insect. I was like, oh yeah, there hasn't been any insects. So I started tracking what insects I saw. How many tree leaves. Oh, I started drawing how high all the marsh plants were getting compared to my leg, because it was fascinating. When it was also my first winter, my first year in Wisconsin. So when I started, I had to walk a half mile to get to my nest, and it was just like walking over snow. Everything was flat, completely flat. Everything was white or gray or brown. And over the months, like when the plants started to grow, they started to grow. And all of a sudden, on my trail there started to be things up to my shoulders. They started to be things over my head, different plants. And it was so cool to see. Like, I had no idea that would happen. And so, just thinking about the entire environment of where the study was taking place in the Eagles was just so interesting. Do I have one more slide? Oh, I guess I'll also say quickly that I love maps. Maps, the path I took here, etc. Maps was something I skipped completely for this data science project, citizen science project. I mentioned that we had to keep the locations completely confidential. And I was worried someone locally might flip through my sketchbook and I'll had written too many clues or something, and accidentally give away the location of the nest. So I was like, I'm just going to write none of that down. So I don't even think I write the location at all in here. You'll see in my next citizen science project I go through that I do a lot of mapping. Let's see. Okay, getting almost done. Okay, babies. Oh my gosh, they made these like little practice hops or something where they're just like putting their wings out and I don't know, like hop across the nest as if they were like practicing flight or something, maybe, even though they weren't flying yet. And that like head shape kind of that I drew on my bookmark was helping me a little here. I'm like, yeah, that's a bald eagle-ish. It has that flat head out. It kind of works. So that was super fun. And then by week 20, it was really cool. I finally came and I saw no babies, and I did see babies, and there was a test that again in the training sessions early on, you had to figure out, okay, when had a baby had actually fledged. So you can see this is my little map. We got Y1, Y2, Y3. That's youth one. That's the abbreviations they wanted us to use. And so that's each of the little babies. And what we had to figure out was, could those chicks have gotten to the places on the trees just by walking there? Or did they have to fly to get to where they were? Okay. And so for this one, Y3 had clearly fledged because it was on a totally separate tree. Whereas Y1 and Y2, I could not consider them they may have flown to those places, but it wasn't confirmed. So, the scientists as part of the study say, okay, only when you can confirm it, that's when you can say they have left the nest. And I think I was doing this with a team of people, right? And so I think by the next time I missed it, but then the other two babies had fledged and gone away. And I also learned that that had like 3 chicks for bald eagles is a little rare. They often have 2 and then sometimes 1. So I was like, wow, that was so cool to get to experience that. One last note on this project before I jump to the other one is I did have to draw this thing at the top of my page 20 times. And it got a little old. Like, it was a lot of work to do. Like, before I could even start my clock, I had to be out there for 1 hour. To start my clock, I had to like draw that all because I was like, I'm going to do this. All my pages are going to look the same. So I did start to think, I've done a lot of citizen science projects at this point. And for my current one, I'm like, what if I kind of hand drew something and photocopied it, maybe on cardstock? I could like 3-hole punch it and put it in a binder or something. Like, do I want to save that time? It depends. This one I went out 20 times. If you're only doing a study 3 or 5 times, I don't know. But I was starting to think of like, are there ways if we wanted students to go not necessarily faster, but even for memory, there's different ways to do it. But to remember all the things, you could print it out. You could just draw it in your sketchbook a number of times. All right. Okay, it's 2:50. I want to go a little faster. Let's see. Okay, so this is a different project, the Bird Collision Core. And this happens every spring and every fall. It's an 8-week period. One volunteer goes out every morning. And so I'd cover 1 day a week. I did it every Friday. And this is all about birds hitting windows. So everyone was assigned one building in the area. And these are buildings that agreed to be part of the study. And so this project was interesting. It's all about man-made environments versus, the eagles being very different in their own kind of more natural environment. And the project aim for this study was to help get data to support things like bills or like city ordinances, like government policy making to make safer buildings, and making sure they follow regulations, hopefully for like bird safe kind of glass. And oh, and this is one that I couldn't believe it, that like I did a modified version of this talk I'm doing now to other people who like were in the bird collision corps or the bald eagle corps a few weeks ago, and a teacher was there, and I was so excited. So I talked with her on the phone yesterday to hear a little bit about her tips. She wasn't a nature journaler. She came to my talk to learn how maybe to incorporate nature journaling in the future, but it was really interesting to see, to just like hear about her process. So I might mention some of those things throughout. I'm just going to skip that. I'm running out of time. Okay. So again, this study, like the last study, came with procedure, and it came with data sheets that we were going to have to fill out. And so I did some sketch noting on the rules. Let me zoom in once. So this one is what we did. So I kind of got to pick a building. I picked a local library. And what you have to do is you walk around the building with imaginary estimated 6 feet on your left, 6 feet on your right, and you like scan. You're supposed to slowly scan with your eyes, like all of that land, all of the ground within that kind of perimeter as you walk around. Let's see. And then here's my little flow chart. So what do you do if you find a dead bird? Is it alive? Oh yeah. So what do you do when you find a bird if it's not dead, if it's alive, but stunned? They gave us lots of materials, a little baggie of materials. So we'd put it in a little paper bag if it was alive, and just needed to kind of protect it and monitor it to make sure it was okay. If it was injured, we'd drive it to a local wildlife center. Or if it was dead, we'd put it in a bag with some gloves on and put it in a freezer. You can go straight to the lab's freezer, or you can put it in your freezer at home and bring them to the lab later. And let's see. And there were paper things you could print out, but in the end, the organization ended up like having you submit your data through iNaturalist. So they created like a private iNaturalist group. You had to take photos if you found something. You had to plot. Plot like where on the building, like the north side, the east side, the west side, essentially giving enough information so that they could maybe locate like the windows that you're speaking about. And then things like wind and weather and some of the more traditional data that you often take.
Amy, just bounce back to that little hummingbird there. In that photograph, does that hummingbird have a tick on its head?
Oh, that was the first one I found, and I wrote a lot about that, of like, what is that? You could tell it was really shiny, and it looked like a slug to me.
Oh.
Yeah, but yeah, at first I was like, is it a growth? So that you'll see later that, yeah, that with this one, because they were not moving and you could get really up close to them, I was doing a lot more detailed studies of the birds if I found them, some more realistic poses and a lot of questions, and they ended up looking a bit more like some of my normal nature journal pages, as well as the data in my sketchbook.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So those are just some of the birds I found while scanning the area. And because this, study was all about the buildings, the interaction between nature and a building, I definitely want to do maps in my sketchbook. And it turns out the building I was monitoring was like the most complicated building in the world. The perimeter is crazy shape. It's not a rectangle. It was really fascinating. So I use Google Maps and just kind of one thing, of course, that you can't see from this angle, but like where are the largest windows? Only one kind of side of this building has like these giant floor to ceiling windows, which is one reason they were the organization was interested in this building for their study. And then there's kind of smaller windows elsewhere. Was interested a little in where the trees were, where the plants were. So just kind of a diagram, and that helped me, I don't know, it helped me get familiar with my building. Also, since it was such a fascinatingly weird shape, I also did some 3D renderings of it. Part of it is like up on stilts on these columns, etc. Really interesting stuff.
Wait, maybe could you go back one page?
Yep. Mhm.
I'm noticing in this map view, you then have a key down on the side
Oh,
to
yeah.
to show the shape of the window were you to look at it from a different angle. That's a really interesting way of including three-dimensional information in this two-dimensional map. So remember, folks, I was talking about sort of a master visualizer here. I'm seeing that in play here. You've got this key to the window type. And so then as you're looking down on this top view, you know something about the face view of that window. That's cool.
Yeah, and it was really complicated and fun to figure out. All around the top of the building has these little tiny, well, they were that big. But even if it was 2 stories, there were windows everywhere. But then some were big, some were normal size, some were humongous, and some were like extra small. So very interesting to see what was going on there. Oh, skip that. Oh, I have one of my old tips on screen from another presentation. But yes, essentially, where are you going to put the data? So again, this was kind of like just a template of what I did every week. And let's see. And so here's one of my actual pages. On the right side was very much a just, I'm gonna sit with this bird for a long time and just kind of study it. So let's see, in this one, have a couple different angles here, kind of what it looked like on the side. I don't know my birds too well. I was finding things like robins and a hummingbird that I recognized. This bird I'd never seen before. It had this amazingly cute and gorgeous like orange mohawk area. It was so adorable. So we were able to use, I use an app called Seek to help me identify it. And then when you put it on iNaturalist, like they'll make sure you identified it right and everything. But yeah, just looking at kind of the patterns on its wings and everything was very interesting. So yeah, it's interesting. Having worked in a museum and being around collections of dead specimens that the scientists are using for study and stuff, I don't know. I don't have much of emotional reaction when I see like tons of bird skins. I'm just like, wow, they're beautiful, like all these dead bird. And I thought I'd kind of have the same reaction in this, being like, oh, that's very sad, but it's a dead. But like it was like extra emotional because you knew it had like just died. Like since someone was out there every morning for 8 weeks, that means it had died in the last 24 hours. It could have died in the last hour. So it was quite sad, but it was nice to, I don't know, just appreciate the birds and spend some time with them. Oh, that's just a in progress shot, and you can see the little guy right there.
Yeah.
This is when I was working on that hummingbird. Here's my little slug picture of that. I thought it was a hernia or something, and I can't remember when I figured out it was a slug. I think it was moving probably, and became clear it was a slug. Yeah. And let's see. Oh, one of the interesting highlights for me, my first time doing this, I think done like 4 seasons now. But the first time I saw an alive bird, but it was just sitting there. It was stunned. And so I put it, so this is just me kind of telling its story. I had plenty of time to tell its story because I sat with it for like 30 or 40 minutes. So just about the kind of process. I put it in a paper bag. Was a little nervous about picking it up because I didn't want to freak it out. It was very interesting. Um, it kind of just like walked right in as like I put the bag down and it just kind of wanted to go, barely with me prompting. So that was very interesting. They didn't tell us why we were putting it in a bag, but I imagine, well, I was kind of wondering, I don't think I have the question on this page, but like, does it feel safe? It's very out in the open when it was just stunned and couldn't really move out, you know, and so it's like, oh, here's a little hiding spot, maybe. And yeah, so I sat with it, and eventually, here's just some pictures of it, me just looking in that bag, and getting some extra time to write. And eventually I realized, oh, I should put the bag like on the side so it can walk away when it wants to or fly away. And so yeah, eventually it got better enough to walk away on its own, which, you know, told me that I didn't need to bring it over to the like a wildlife center. It didn't seem injured. Okay. And one of the coolest things about citizen science to me.
Could we
Go on.
bounce
Yeah,
back to that robin?
yeah.
Maybe the first view we had of that robin.
This one?
Yeah, what an odd looking little robin. I'm
Hmm.
I'm noticing that there's that strange white spot swash in its chest. Makes me wonder if this is a leucistic robin. Sort of, some birds have more white than they're supposed to. They didn't read the field guide. And this one also has, it's looking like, let's see their sketch of it. Yeah, a really short tail. So short wings and tail. And what's strange about that is, I'm wondering if there's sort of in the middle of some crazy molt right here with all these, because I think of young robins being all spotty. But why does this one, which seems to have some adult patterns, have this really short tail? What a cool puzzle bird. I want to find out what happens to it.
Yeah, Jack's page would be full of questions. I wonder what angle I was drawing it from, if its tail really was that short, or if it's my proportions, but I don't know much about robins, so that's really fascinating to hear. And that's one of the if you can go out in a group in nature journaling with multiple students, multiple people, just hearing all this other questions from other people just gets you inspired, and, you know, kind of starts a chain of curiosity. So that's really fascinating, Jack. Okay. Yes. So one of the I went back kind of at the end of the study, looking at my data and looking at the other folks' data who were in my group, and were monitoring this building, and were like put some stickers on things where I found birds. And it was really clear. It was really interesting to find those patterns. Because there was a pattern. Maybe, you know, there's a world where I may not have found a pattern. But there was this clear area where most of the birds were showing up. And I did start out having an assumption, or like having a hypothesis of where I would find birds, which was interesting. And this is, you know, just for fun. This is nature journaling. These aren't things, you know, of course, that I had the answers. So the scientists had the answers. They figure this out. So this is just me trying to think like a scientist and having some fun with it. So since I knew that we were doing this during migration period, it was like 8 weeks during spring migration and fall migration. I assumed it had something to do, like, I was like, what every time I found a bird, I was like, where do they migrate to? And, you know, and I was finding out like, okay, some don't migrate. Or my hypothesis was like, maybe it's going to go in the same direction, you know, that its migration paths were, or like maybe the wind would affect where it was blown into. And it was interesting because like it clearly did not, what my pattern that I found did not show that was true, or did not like support that or anything, which is really cool. And also it can be a danger of a hypothesis up front of just like, I'm going to look at all that data or something. But so it's really fun to be like, oh yeah, that idea doesn't seem correct. That's interesting. So kind of reflecting on that. And the other cool thing was, so this is just me looking at all the data from the other participants too, just kind of for fun. And I did realize, gosh, it wasn't this season. I did this more and more times, and I kind of finally made the connection back to my overhead map, which I don't have here right in front of me, but I kind of realized that this area was the area that had the most trees near the glass. And so and I did actually end up asking one of the like bird expert people who coordinated this study, like, is that a connection? Is that and she was like, yeah. So if there's like reflections of greenery foliage, birds are more likely to think, like, just get confused and think, yeah, there's plants over there, I'm just going to fly over there. So this is my note. These are some of my notes from the last couple weeks where I was documenting when the trees near that window were they started out bare, and then when they were getting buds and they got flowers and stuff, which was interesting. I didn't like see any patterns or anything, but it was just kind of like, oh, trees, this is interesting. I'm gonna track a little data about trees now, because I realize that that's kind of a that's a factor. And let's see, it's 3:10. That's about all I have to show. And yeah, maybe we could think of some ideas about how we could actually apply this to classrooms or group, or going around with students in some ways.
Yeah, the first thing that jumped to my head is that in both these cases, you have a mission. There's a purpose of making these observations, and something is being done with the information, which makes that makes me think that there'd probably be greater buy-in by students in doing something like that. I also like it that there's a protocol, and once the students get onto that, they would come out to the place and they would know what to do. You kind of have a routine for data collection, and you could talk about things like consistency of data collection. If we did it this way one week and this other way another week, that might be more fun because it would mix it up a little bit. How would that affect our ability to kind of analyze this data? By doing something like this with students, there would be a lot of interesting conversations that you can have. This is really cool, Amy.
Yeah, it's been fun. I got hooked. I didn't know I would, but it's been really fascinating. Yeah.
We'd like to open this some questions up to our larger audience here. So if you have a question for Amy, or a thought or idea, what does this make you think about data collection with students and kind of how to get students involved in an actual research project? You can use the raise hand function in Zoom. There's a little button you push, and then we'll know that you've got a question. You can also just turn on your camera and wave at us, and then we'll see that you've got something to share. While we're waiting for that, an interesting part of this, I love the idea that because you're part of this larger research project, that the data is being used for something, and you're part of a larger mission. The flip side of that is the students are not involved in coming up with the question and figuring out how to investigate that. And sometimes, like, I know when we do science projects in schools, and the teacher says, like, here's how we're going to do this experiment, and here's how you're going to collect the data. We're essentially teaching kids not to be scientists, but to be lab technicians. And that's an interesting balance. Then my other thought on the backside of that thought about that thought is that I wonder about, so if you are to do something like this with students, I think that your nature journaling part of it, which really opens up it takes you to a higher level of inquiry would be really critical. Because then in that nature journaling, like you asked so many questions, you're doing actual inquiry and perhaps figuring out other things that you could investigate. But you're also then have the advantage of this, being part of this larger project and the larger data set. So that's a whole bunch of unrelated thoughts. Would love to kind of know your thinking about that thinking.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from anyone. I did have one thought about one of the things you said though, Jack, and that was right. Like they've already figured out the protocols. You just get a data sheet. Like I think it would be really fun before even showing students, this is what we're going to look for. If you started with, this is what scientists are trying to figure out. Like are bald eagle babies still being born? If, maybe are they laying eggs? Are the eggs hatching? And like, how could we figure that out? And even, one of the ways might be like a helicopter or a drone. Like it doesn't matter what they think of. Like anything could be valid. You could also be like, what if the drone would bother that? Like if we had to be on the ground, what might be some ways that we could maybe figure this out? And then also like, okay, if that nest is unsuccessful, if things, let's say, don't hatch or, et cetera, like what data may like every week be helpful? Well, it might be helpful to know the wind speed, was there a storm? What week was it? We should write down the date every time. Maybe we'll write down the weather. And then, yeah, possibly helping or leading them to any other ideas. Or maybe even coming up with something that would be easy to track every week that isn't on the protocol. That's just, fascinating. Oh yeah, let's track when the trees have leaves too in the, yeah.
Right.
So maybe adding some things. So yeah, trying to help them come up with something and then being like, here's what, the scientists came up with. Let's see, and we'll follow this because everyone's going to do it in the same way. And let's see what that form, the data form is like.
That's cool. Because yeah, the things that, like, as you mentioned, like this idea of the trees leafing out. Boom. That's really relevant. All those beautiful leafy trees then being reflected in the window. Also makes me wonder about trees leafing out with insect emergence, with birds timing migrations to try to get things to eat along the way. There's a lot of confounding factors in there. How did being involved in these research projects change your relationship to either to those species or to places or your thinking about your role in conservation?
So many hard questions. No, so I did not feel like I had a role in conservation at all. I used to Nature Journal. I didn't do any stewardship as far as I knew or could think of, so this is my first time doing that. And so it feels, I don't know, it feels so cool. I love it. Occasionally, sometimes I've thought like, what if I had become a scientist in my career instead of going in this educator route, And so it's just really powerful to be able to help in a small way. But also if I was taking the straight up, just the straight up data, I wouldn't be thinking as deeply perhaps about all these other questions and these bigger environments or like with the bald eagles, at least like everything else going on. So it's helped me to, I don't know, I think maybe make my experience more like richer than if I was just doing data because I'm using my nature journal. And I'm not sure if I actually answered your questions, Jack, but there's some thoughts.
Does having done this sort of experiment, um, does that move the needle for you on sort of your feeling of agency, having a role in conservation, and your personal commitment or feeling of responsibility to natural systems?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It surprised me in a very positive way, like how many volunteers they have for some of these things. Like there was so many people wanting to do the bald eagle nest watch. So it is one of those things of like, well, someone's going to do so like I don't to answer your first question, which I'm kind of blanking on now, but like, does it feel like I'm very necessary or needed? Part of it feels like no, but also one thing that I think is powerful is people telling their stories. So like people who don't know that citizen science exists. And of course, there are plenty of studies that like do not have enough people. Like these just happen to have a ton of people that are interested in them. There's tons of birders and stuff. So yeah, getting to tell my story as an artist hopefully is I'm trying to still figure out how to do that more. But so in that way, I feel like how can I utilize this even to let like more nature journalers think about citizen science, et cetera. So hopefully we can get more people interested in or doing this. And then yeah, I mean, my personal commitment, I don't know, part of it feels this very selfish. Like it's fun. I want to do this, you know? But yeah, like I've definitely become obsessed with it. And it's really, I have found out like opportunities and I'm starting to think about other types of issues that I haven't thought about before. And like learning about let's see, I've been dabbling in like a frog and toad study recently. And so like thinking about the water and thinking about the water temperature or the humans' relationships with the frogs and like, oh, the people I've been working with have been doing it many years. And they said at this one site that we stop at and listen for frogs, like they used to hear a lot more, but they cut down the trees a few years ago and now they don't, and there's like an aquatic invasive species study that we do. And so that's been really interesting because you can do a lot of online and virtual, of course, citizen science kind of projects, but doing it in my own like neighborhood, my own county and everything is making like, it makes me feel much more connected to the lakes here because I have gone out and dug up weeds and gone through and look at all of them. So yeah, like as a place, I think I'm more connected to here and caring about here too.
That's really cool. I want to just one more follow up on that. I also see Ann Chadwick and Evea have questions for you as well. But because I got your ear right now, I'm going to drop one more sort of follow up on that.
Mhm.
At this library, you're seeing these window strikes, particularly on one side. Is there a way of talking to people about have you considered talking to people at the library about that and coming up with some strategies for the windows on that side to reduce bird strikes? Or is it, I guess that's my question.
Yeah. That's really, really interesting. One of the first things, since I've done this multiple seasons, one of the first things I do is actually look up at those windows and see if any improvements have been made. So there are specific things you can do, like um, add things to essentially break up the reflection, add dots and all these things that scientists have figured out. But yeah, that's a really interesting idea of like asking the library if they would like a talk, about their library. That's really fascinating, though that might put pressure on them if they haven't done anything yet. But yeah, it's also interesting that, so I do this in the morning before the library opens, and it's kind of part of the study. You have like early in the morning, 6 to 9 a.m. You have to get your observations in then. So I don't ever see people, or I wear a little like what is it? It's called like, it's a bird research little thing that I wear around my neck in like highlighter yellow, because I'm creeping around in bushes and look really weird to people. And I think the only conversations I've had with people are one, a staff member, and I was like, oh yeah, this is what I'm doing. And she was like, oh, I know, I helped put this together. I was like, oh cool, yeah. And another person who actually said, yeah, I talked to the library about that not being bird safe glass like years ago. You know, I was like, oh, so they already knew something about that. But yeah, using those same locations uh, would be interesting, especially it being a library and it being an educational place already. Yeah. Part of me also wondered, I was like, do they need control data? So in order to see if anything you change is making an impact, you need to know what the situation was like beforehand. So in a sense, I was like, yeah, I mean, the library chose to be part of the study, so you'd think they're open to making the glass more safe. So yeah, it's been like 2 years of seasons now. I think that it hasn't done anything, but I was like, maybe that's important. I don't know, because they are using this as evidence in policymaking.
Yeah. Cool. Let's bring Ann Chadwick from Point Blue Conservation Science in on this conversation. I'm really glad you're here today, Ann. Ann and Point Blue do lots of research around the globe on different aspects of bird habitats and population numbers that have direct conservation implications. Ann, thank you for being with us. And what does this make you think about?
It makes me think about a lot of things. Very excited to hear what you're doing, Amy. Thanks for sharing all that. And yeah, it makes me think about all the connections. And connection is on my mind because we're working on our next 5-year plan at the at Point Blue Conservation Science. And we're calling it Connected Conservation. And so it's all about collaboration, communication, working with other groups to expand the effectiveness of what our 160 scientists are able to do, which sounds huge, but it's limited. So the more we can collaborate with others, and we do have several citizen scientist projects, community science projects. So I see it as kind of a two-way street. And as you were talking, Amy, I thought, well, all those I wonders in your wonderful journals, they can inform the scientists of great questions to ask. And our scientists are always looking for better questions. Because while you might think that the scientists have all the answers, that's not really how it works. They have to be asking the right questions and following their curiosity. And then, of course, doing the research to find answers and using the data and having it all be evidence-based and so on. But you've got to ask the right questions. So if the community science members can come up with really great questions, I think certainly at Point Blue, I would think our scientists would be open to that. And so that's part of that two-way street. And then the other thing I was saying is that by sharing your experience, whether it's through social media or through teaching others or just talking with the community like you're doing with us or with your other communities, you're spreading the word about what's out there and what the possibilities are, and also just inspiring action, just that, kind of fostering a caring attitude. And I think that's contagious in a good way. So yeah, connections is what came to my mind.
And thank you for that framing. You're absolutely right that I'd like your idea about how getting good connections. So you think of like, just one thing is to share data and information, but also the questions that we come up with are equally important.
Mhm.
And that might inspire somebody then to kind of move on that.
Yep, that's officially part of our plan, is ask better questions.
That's so cool. Yeah. I think I'd be even more absorbed if I knew I could, I don't know, bounce some ideas off scientists, you know, here are my questions too. Which would be, yeah, that would make me, I love curiosity. That's one of my favorite parts about nature journaling. So that would be really motivating. That's fascinating. Yeah.
Mhm. And I love how you develop those templates to kind of keep your framing, and maybe in the process of doing that, you could work with the scientists to sort of frame the questions and frame what you're going to be looking at.
And from the educator perspective, this idea of encouraging people to share questions also puts a real value on those questions. And I think that when students seeing that, that would motivate them to be more curious. Well, yeah, what's gonna happen with these questions? If I write them down in my journal and they stimulate my brain while I'm out there in the field, that's great. But they also then have a potential to have a life beyond that if we have a way of sharing our questions. Wonderful. Anne, thank you again for the work that you and Point Blue are doing in resource and species conservation around the globe. But if people want to learn more about Point Blue, they can go to, what is the URL?
Pointblue.org.
All right.
Yeah, love to
Thank
see you. And we're having our annual meeting on where are we? June, the other J word, June 26th. And so if you go to our website, you can click on something to sign up for our annual meeting, which is all virtual this year. So anybody can jump in. And again, it's pointblue.org. Thank you, Ivea, for posting that.
Thank you, Anne.
Mhm.
I am very interested in the experience of that teacher who you said had gotten their class involved doing a project like this. Do you have any other anecdotes from that about what their experience was, the grade level, or what their protocol was?
Yes, totally forgot to talk about that. Yes, so this is a teacher who doesn't currently do nature journaling, but she is a 4th and 5th grade teacher. What she did was she did small groups of students versus a whole class. I think she said like, I don't know, 4 to 8 students, bringing them out to the site of the bird collision course. So I think she was actually at the same library I was. And she went over data. I was trying to ask her, like, how did you introduce the data? I didn't quite get an answer to that, but essentially each kid could brought a notebook, but it was also somewhat optional for them to do it, especially for, you know, maybe kids who have a hard time or have anxiety around writing, etc. Like, so if it's too much, they can write as little or as much as they want to. We know that at least the teacher was taking all of the data, but they'll be able to experience it. One cool experiential thing she mentioned was that you're supposed to stay. You're supposed to look 6 feet in either direction when you're going around the building. So she said, like, she had kids walk side by side, which is cool, to be like, that's about 6 feet. Yeah, I was like, that's so cool. And one thing that I thought was really fascinating is that she said she as well, like, was not just sticking to the data sheet. She was like, it kind of became a talk about all the things we were noticing because there's so much else in
Yeah.
nature going on. So she said, like, she told her kids, whenever, if you ever see anything interesting, like say something, you know, see something, say something, or hear something. And so she was talking about at one point there being, you know, mushrooms that a kid was really excited about. The other thing that was really interesting was that so there was small groups going out, and the teacher, though, at the end of the week would just like put together a few of the photos she took and then have those students just tell the rest of the class, like on a presenter screen, show the pictures and having the kids just mention so what they saw that week, so that there's still a continuality of even if you weren't going out that week. She also said that there was an opportunity, like you had to go at least once, but the kids could optionally go again, and that like everyone wanted to. And so she said like the kids were extremely into this, which just sounds so exciting. So she said she also was involved with Project Feeder Watch, which I'm not too familiar with, but I think that's a citizen science project that I think anyone can set up. I'm sure there's a website for it. And so she'd have a bird feeder outside their window. And they practiced doing data sheet examples, and then kids could kind of just go to the window whenever they had free time and make notes about who came to visit, what birds came to visit. And she also mentioned that at one point, I can't remember. At one point, there was something like a kid had a question, and they had many questions, but there was one question that was kind of easy to test and follow up with. And I think it was like, well, how many birds are coming here generally? Like, you know, these are the ones that have been visiting the feeder, but like, just how many birds are about? So at some point, they just did like a walk around the school just to like listen or try to see all the birds around, which was really cool. Yeah.
That is really cool. I want that teacher to be teaching my kids. That's really cool.
Yeah, and if she starts doing a little nature journaling in there too,
I was thinking that they're not doing nature journaling yet, but maybe that's the next level. Amy, thank you so much for sharing this experience. And wait, hold on, I've got to sneeze somewhere. No, I'm just going to make funny faces. It's not going to come out. I'm just going to, sorry. I wanted to thank you so much for coming down here and joining us today and sharing this experience and this I think could really get us thinking about perhaps the impact of getting our students involved with citizen science. I like the idea of citizen science joined with the journaling so that you are contributing to a larger project and you see what protocols look like, and you can have these discussions about the importance of doing that. But then also combining that with the journaling that allows you to also have a chance to creatively think about and engage with the place. This is really fun. Before we go, let's bring on the Mad Botanist, who I think also has other questions for you, and then we'll be closing for today. Hey.
So I kind of feel like you already answered this, but I thought I'd ask again, just in case. My main questions for you were, do you feel that being a nature journaler has made you a better citizen scientist? And if so, how? Also, has being a citizen scientist changed how you are as a nature journaler and a nature lover in general? And has the context that nature journaling given your data also given you new insights that you might not have otherwise had? Sort of like building on that question about what kinds of question we ask and give attention to, and then does that change the question that scientists are investigating? Do you see that as part of your process about thinking, oh, this is a good question that we're asking, but maybe we could be also looking at this one? Those are my questions for you, as well as to say that I heard 2 International Baccalaureate Keys concepts today. I heard us talking about responsibility and about connection, and those are both on the the International Baccalaureate School Key Concepts list. So that applies. And then also, if people want more resources, I put a ton of resources into the chat about other ways of connecting student service learning and curricula tie-ins with environmental stewardship and citizen rights.
Cool. So jump on some of those questions. I see you wrote them above, which is great. I have a reference. Do I feel that being a nature journaler makes me a better citizen scientist? No. As far as in comparison to other citizen scientists, we're all gathering the data and making sure, and giving it to scientists online. And that was an interesting thing that when I gave a modified talk about this to other citizen scientists that did my projects, and I was trying to figure out, how to say not say like nature journaling made my experience richer. Like, you guys aren't doing this wrong. Like, this isn't so to balance that. So I think as far as you can be a great citizen scientist without doing nature journaling at all, but like my experience has become so much richer. And I think it's helped me, helped me think more like a scientist, even more about like, oh, in the future, what data would I need? That kind of thing. So yeah, has being a citizen scientist changed you as a nature journaler? Ooh, I don't know. I've always admired people who have done like long-term studies, like looked at the same thing for multiple weeks. That was always cool, but I never had the patience to do that. I was just like, that's really cool. Oh my gosh, I'm never going to do that. And so it's been cool. Like, again, I love commitments and holding myself to things. So like, I love that I finally got to do that because I committed to this. So that's been really fascinating looking at things over time. And I guess that has changed me as a nature journaler because this fall I did a big data collecting project by myself. I was just tracking like 10 trees in my neighborhood, seeing how they changed color in fall and when they lost their leaves. Oh, yeah, well, they're falling off. They're falling off my wall, but I made pie charts and that's some of them. And I made like 10 accordion books and it was super fun. And that was just kind of for me. So yeah, I'm more now, more likely to maybe journal about something more than once and stick to it. So that was fascinating. And yeah, the context nature journaling gives your data has new insights that you might not have otherwise had. Can you restate that quick? Can you expand on that question, Eva?
Sure thing. What I mean by that is, so we're taking down the data about when we see this, this eagle or this other eagle, and then the time and everything like that. But then I noticed that when you add in the landscapito, and then you begin to notice when the leaves are changing, sort of like what we were talking about earlier, that maybe the leaves changing isn't necessarily on that data sheet, but you're nature journaling about that, or you're nature journaling the flight patterns so that you see where they're going. Does that give you insights that if you were taking down the data that was on the original sheet, does it give you insights beyond that sheet? I guess is sort of what I'm asking.
Yeah, definitely. I think the data sheets are all about I notice, but also I notice on like a narrow, very specific topic. So getting to expand the I notice, even again, like the scientists don't need it, but you're getting to notice all these other things that might have an effect. And I guess one thing that I found very helpful was after the window collision citizen scientist project, even the first time I did that, I went back and I summarized things and I looked back at my weekly things and I plotted things like I went back and analyzed my data, but like I thought about it and I like charted some things and I continued to think about that. And I did not do that for the bald eagles. And I thought about it a lot and I think I was making it a big deal. I was like, oh, I went through this whole art project and I'm going to make a timeline, whatever. And then it felt overwhelming. But essentially, like, I think it's really valuable too. And it kind of changed how I thought about the pages when I went back one more time and like tried to look at, oh, this is everything that happened. And so you could do that with students too, of like, okay, what week did the eggs, did we first notice the eggs? Like make a big timeline. Okay, and then how many weeks later till we noticed they hatched, and then etc. And you could also, you know, track, oh, when did the leaves come, etc. At least for these projects, it's cool because you got to hear about like the other people doing the projects or other sites. So we did get like a data report back about the like the window collisions data from other places. So, you know, in theory, if you were, I don't know, I love that. I love being able to like hear something back from the scientists when you give something like, ooh, can I have something back too? So that was fascinating. And also I had a bunch of questions about that. I'm just rambling on now. Sorry, Bea, but I mean, yeah. And so, and one of the things I saw about that is like some of the buildings like had, or some of the sites had so many birds, and then some of bird collisions and or deaths, and some of them had so few. And then I was like, well, okay, how big are the buildings? And like some of them I know are like complexes. One is like university buildings all in one. And then it was like, okay, but like how, you know, like what's the perimeter of these buildings, and like how bigger are the buildings, like how big are the windows, you know, etc. And now like, okay, and which of those windows have trees in front of them, you know, like all these other questions I had once I saw other data too. So there's so many ways, yeah, to connect this. Someone said to connect this to math standards in the classroom, or probably NGSS. And so you can go like more and more and more layers with the data. You can do so many different things with the data, and it kind of changes your view, or it helps you ask more questions the more ways you look at it.
I love that. And then while you were describing that, I had this lovely little image in my head of, what if Amy Tan decided that she wanted to do a book tour of all of the libraries and public buildings that have a lot of bird collision strikes to talk about backyard bird chronicles? And what if she inspired them to change their windows just because she showed up and talked about it? Plus, I mean, library, book, author, signings, fun. Anyway, thank you. I love hearing your questions.
Amy, thank you so much for being here with us today. I think this really puts the impact of citizen science projects on my radar as a classroom activity. There's so much potential there, and coupling that with nature journaling, I think, would be particularly powerful. It's really great to see you. Before we let you go, could we ask you again just to turn your camera over to the wall over your right shoulder and tell us a little bit about what is going on your thinking there, because that looked really interesting.
Yeah, so they're all falling down. So these are 4 of like 10 little booklet things I made. They're accordion books. I just have them spread out. But anyway, I picked kind of 10 random trees around my neighborhood. And like, so yeah, big drawing of the tree, kind of a leaf. And then each week I played around with all these different ways that I wanted to track this. I was texting it to people, I think, and like, give me feedback. What do you like? But what I ended up doing was every week I made a pie chart that both was what color are the leaves this week, and also how many leaves are like present versus how many have fallen off. So this one, say the leaves they were all green, I think, and then like a fourth of them by estimation had fallen off. And then each of these, I did that for the pages that line up. That's like, come on, hand, I can't do this. That's the same week for all the trees. And so yeah, it was kind of interesting. It was very fun. It also, interestingly enough, I like dread winter, and I barely noticed that winter was starting because I was having so much fun with the leaves falling. I was like, oh, this is fun. This is great. So yeah, this was another intense, this one, I'm like, if I ever do this again, there's no way I'm ever hand drawing all these circles ever again. I'm going to print this out and cut it up with books. It was horrible. I dragged my feet on it. Sometimes I just take notes on my phone because there's like too many circles, too I was worried about making them look pretty and perfect for this. So I was just like, ugh, print them out. But yeah, it was really, really fascinating. And there was a couple interesting things. I learned that like I did the same type of tree 2 times. They're not up there, but same type of tree, but 2 different individual trees. And so seeing how those were different, that was kind of fun. And I think that's, but I also had like a lot of hypotheses and questions and noticing patterns in the end of like, oh gosh, one thing I didn't have on here is like where it started changing colors. And like, I was noticing like, it's very different for different trees. And that's so fascinating. And like, and yeah, so just noticing all these differences and who knows, it's one of those things of like, now I have more questions. And if I did it in the future, I ended up eventually putting in this like crunchy bar, where is it? Crunchy bar of, oh, I forgot the leaves were gonna like dry up, but they might not have dropped yet. And so then, you know, added on more data. It's always nice when when you have your data sheets, if you're leaving a lot of room for yourself to Nature Journal generally, but also, you know, I didn't leave any room for myself more than I was like, okay, I'll have an inch for like some words. So it was very fun. Yeah.
And you have a crunchy bar.
A crunchy bar. Yeah. Crunchiness.
On that note, I know that there's a lot of people who may be hungry. It is about lunchtime over here in California. It's time for us to go get our crunchy bars. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much also for letting us take a look into your brain. Data meets graphic visualization meets diagram meets citizen science meets engaging with the world. Thank you so much, Amy. It's great to see you again.
It was so fun here being with all you, all educators. Good luck with all your endeavors. So great teaching. I admire teachers so much. So have a good week, y'all.
We sure will. And Avea, thank you so much for wrangling everything behind the scenes and for sharing your thoughts and inspiration with all of us. Take care, everyone. Until we meet again, stay curious, be kind. We can do this, and let's do it together.